You are forbidden to make this oil. The same chapter that gives you the recipe, the same chapter, verse 33, tells you that anyone who compounds it for personal use shall be cut off from his people. Cut off. The Torah uses that phrase 43 times across its 5 books. It is not a mild warning. It means exile from the covenant community. In the ancient world, that was the equivalent of a death sentence for everything that mattered. And yet, God gave Moses the formula in Exodus chapter 30, and in the same breath, in the same chapter 13 verses later, God banned it. The formula exists, the prohibition exists, both are real. And for 3,000 years, only one man in the history of ancient Israel had the legal authority to make this oil and use it for his entire household. King Solomon. Tonight I'm going to show you exactly what was in that oil. 4 substances, exact weights, exact ratios, all of them in one of the most precise passages in the entire Torah. And then I am going to show you how to make it, because the person who reads the prohibition carefully, the person who understands what Solomon's authority actually was and what your authority actually is, will understand that you are not violating Exodus chapter 30, verse 33. You are fulfilling James chapter 5, verse 14. Let me show you the difference. Let me read you the formula. This is Exodus chapter 30, verses 22 through 25. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Take the finest spices of liquid myrrh 500 shekels, and of sweet-smelling cinnamon half as much, that is, 250 shekels, and 250 shekels of aromatic cane, and 500 shekels of cassia, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, and a hin of olive oil. And you shall make of these a sacred anointing oil blended as by the perfumer. It shall be a holy anointing oil." 5 lines, exact weights. 5 substances, 4 spices and 1 carrier. This is the most precise recipe in the entire Torah. No other formula in the Pentateuch specifies weights and ratios with this kind of technical precision. Not the bread of the presence, not the incense of the tabernacle, not any of the temple offerings, this one. 5 lines, 4 spices, 1 carrier, exact weights, and 13 verses later, the harshest domestic prohibition in the book. Whoever compounds any like it, or whoever puts any of it on an outsider, shall be cut off from his people. The formula is given and immediately locked behind a capital restriction. That combination, precise formula, plus immediate severe prohibition, tells you everything you need to know about what this oil actually is. This is not a recipe. This is a covenant substance. Let me explain what I mean by that. When the Torah says the anointing oil shall be holy, kodesh, it does not mean blessed or fragrant or set apart in a vague religious sense. It means the oil carries a specific relational charge. Whoever the oil touches enters into the covenant relationship that the oil represents. The tabernacle was anointed with it, and the tabernacle became the dwelling place of the divine presence. The priests were anointed with it, and the priests became the authorized mediators of the divine covenant. Aaron was anointed with it. His sons were anointed with it. That oil on the head of Aaron was the mechanism by which Aaron became the high priest. Not the ceremony alone, not the robe alone, not the declaration alone. The oil transferred covenant authority. Now you understand why the prohibition was immediate and severe. Making this oil casually, applying it to people outside the covenant, outside the authorized structure, is not a superstition violation. It is a category error. It is as if someone took the documents of a binding legal instrument, a deed, a title, a formal covenant, and began attaching them to property that had no relationship to the original agreement. The oil carries a claim. Attaching it to anyone or anything randomly is not just irreverent. It is legally incoherent in the framework of the covenant it represents. This is why God banned it in the same breath he gave it. Not cruelty, not arbitrary restriction, precision. The formula is given. The authorization structure is defined. And only within that authorization structure does the oil function as intended. Which brings us to Solomon. 1 Kings chapter 1 verse 39. The priest Zadok took the horn of oil from the tent and anointed Solomon. The horn of oil. This is specific. This is not fresh oil prepared for the occasion. This is the oil from the tabernacle itself, the horn, the vessel, the container of the covenant anointing oil going back to Moses and Aaron and the wilderness. Solomon was anointed with the same oil that anointed Aaron, and 7 years later, Solomon built the temple. He was not merely king, he was the anointed one who built the house where the anointing oil lived. In 1 Kings chapter 8, the temple dedication, Solomon functions in a role that has no other equivalent in all of Israel's history. He is king. He is the son of David. He is the builder and consecrator of the temple. And his prayer, 44 verses, the longest recorded prayer in the Hebrew Bible, functions as high priestly intercession. He intercedes for the nation in a way only a high priest could intercede. No other king did this. No other person in Israel's history combined the anointing of a king with the priestly function of the temple's consecration. The prohibition of Exodus 33 was real. It had not been revoked, but Solomon's authority exceeded the scope of the restriction. He was the anointed king who built and consecrated the temple where the oil was stored. He was the only man in the history of Israel who could legitimately deploy the formula for his entire household. For every room in the temple, for every person he anointed, without violating the covenant structure, the prohibition was designed to protect. The ban was designed to keep the formula from being misused. Solomon was the man with the authority to use it correctly. There is a distinction there that matters, and I want to come back to it at the end. Now let me take you through the 4 ingredients, one at a time, because these are not abstract spices in a theological formula. These are substances with histories, with smells, with markets and trade routes and meanings that Solomon would have known from childhood. The first is myrrh, morder, or in Hebrew pure myrrh, liquid myrrh, the finest grade taken from the Commiphora myrrha tree, the same species used today. When you crack open the bark of this tree and the resin begins to flow, it is yellow gold. You can smell it from across the room. It is one of the oldest traded substances in the ancient world. It is the smell of the embalmer. Myrrh was used for burial preparation across the ancient Near East, across Egypt, across Israel. When Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea prepared the body of Jesus for burial, the Gospel of John says they used a mixture of myrrh and aloes. This is the same substance, the same species, 3,000 years of use. Solomon worked with it. He prayed in rooms that smelled of it. He knew that smell the way you know the smell of the house you grew up in. The formula requires 500 shekels of it, roughly 6 kilograms. Twice as much as either of the other spices. The first ingredient is the dominant note. The second is fragrant cinnamon. Cinnamon besem in Hebrew, cinnamon of the spices, the aromatic kind. Cinnamomum verum, the inner bark, the same species. Cinnamon in Solomon's world was not the affordable spice you reach for without thinking. It came from Sri Lanka, from the Spice Islands, across the Indian Ocean, up through the Red Sea, or overland through Arabia. It was traded by weight against gold equivalents. Solomon controlled the trade routes. He knew exactly what this cost. He could afford it in quantities no one else in the known world could match. 250 shekels, half the weight of the myrrh. The formula's ratio is already telling you something. Myrrh is the foundation. Cinnamon sharpens and brightens what myrrh establishes. The third ingredient is where it becomes complicated. Aromatic cane, kanebosum in Hebrew. The standard translation for 400 years of English Bible history has been calamus, Acorus calamus, the sweet flag plant, an aromatic wetland reed. And calamus is the translation you will find in virtually every Bible on your shelf. I want to tell you about the other possibility. In 1967, a Polish Jewish anthropologist named Sula Bene published a linguistic analysis of the word kane bosem. She traced the phonetic root, kane, aromatic reed, across Semitic languages, Akkadian, Assyrian, Hebrew, and she found that the root matches with striking consistency what ancient Akkadian texts call kunubu, a substance that scholars of ancient Near Eastern pharmacology have linked to cannabis. I want to be precise here. This is an academic debate. It is not settled. The standard biblical dictionaries, the Brown Driver Briggs, the Halot, translate kanebosum as calamus. Sula Bene's phonetic argument has not displaced the traditional translation. But in 2020, a peer-reviewed archaeological report described findings at Tel Arad, an ancient Judahite shrine in the south of Israel, where excavators found cannabis resin mixed with animal dung on the altar stones. Physical evidence of cannabis in an ancient Hebrew worship context. The first physical evidence of its kind. The debate is still open. For our purposes tonight, I am going to follow the traditional translation. Calamus, a chorus, calamus. Not because I am avoiding the controversy, but because calamus is available, legal in most countries, historically documented in this formula, and sufficient for what we are making. What you do with the Tel Arad evidence and Sula Bene's argument is between you and the text. The fourth ingredient is cassia, kidda in Hebrew. Cinnamomum cassia, a different species from cinnamon bark, though they share a genus. Cassia is the outer bark. If cinnamon is warm and rounded, the interior note, cassia is harder, more peppery at the edge. The bark that knows it is a boundary substance, 500 shekels of it, same weight as the myrrh. The formula's structure, read across its weights, looks like this. 500 myrrh, 250 cinnamon, 250 calamus, 500 cassia, 4 parts myrrh, 2 parts cinnamon, 2 parts calamus, 4 parts cassia. All of it dissolved in a hin of olive oil, somewhere between 3 and 6 liters, depending on which ancient measurement calculation you follow. The olive oil is not an afterthought. Olive oil is the covenant carrier throughout the Hebrew scriptures. The lampstand in the tabernacle burned olive oil. The grain offerings were mixed with olive oil. Every anointing formula in the Torah uses olive oil as the base. The oil you carry forward into skin, into the wood of a doorpost, into the walls of a room. Olive oil is the medium through which the covenant substance moves. Now here is something I want you to sit with. Solomon did not just use this formula, he lived inside it. Song of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 14. Nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, along with all the finest spices. Read that list again. Calamus, cinnamon, myrrh. 3 of the 4 core ingredients from Exodus 30, embedded in Solomon's own love poetry. He wrote them in, not as references to a sacred formula, not as theological allusions, as the vocabulary for what he found most beautiful. These 4 substances were so present in his daily world, so much the smell of the rooms he moved through, the oil he was anointed with, the compound he kept and prepared and used, that when he reached for language to describe desire, these were the words his hands found. He did not write the tabernacle incense or the sacred anointing oil. He wrote calamus and cinnamon, myrrh and aloes. He embedded the recipe in a love poem, because for Solomon, the formula was not abstract theology. It was the smell of his life. Let me tell you about a tradition that has not allowed this formula to die. Not a manuscript tradition, not a rabbinical commentary preserved in a university archive. A living practice in churches that are open this week. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church consecrates something called Myron, the Holy Chrism, annually. The Patriarch himself presides over the preparation. The formula contains approximately 30 spices dissolved in an olive oil base. Among them, myrrh, cinnamon, cassia, aromatic cane, aloes, balsam, frankincense. The core of Exodus chapter 30, surrounded by additional spices that have been incorporated across 16 centuries of practice. This preparation was given to Ethiopia in the 4th century of the Common Era. The Patriarch Athanasius of Alexandria brought it to the new Ethiopian church under King Ezana, the first Christian king of Ethiopia, the man who converted his kingdom in the 300s. Athanasius worked directly from Exodus chapter 30. He gave the young Ethiopian church the formula God gave Moses. And Ethiopia has not changed it since. 1670 years. The same formula, not revised, not simplified, not adapted for modern tastes. The Ethiopian deacons will tell you if you ask, we have not changed this since Athanasius gave it to Ezana. In their word, it has not changed since the founding of their church. That is not a theological claim made from tradition alone. That is historical continuity, with a specific starting point, a named patriarch, a named king, a known century. And it is still being prepared. In Addis Ababa, in churches in London and Washington and Sydney and Toronto, in rooms where the smell of ancient Israel arrives every year on a specific Sunday, where Exodus chapter 30 is not a historical curiosity or a subject for academic seminars. It is Sunday morning. I need to tell you how I came to understand this, not from a text, from a smell. It was in my mid-40s. I had been working with a colleague at King's College on a paper about the textual transmission of anointing formulas from the Pentateuch through the Apostolic era. We had arranged a meeting on a Thursday morning in Battersea. I arrived early. I was walking along a side street near the landmark my colleague had named, and I stopped. Not because I intended to stop, because something came through a partially open door and stopped me on the pavement. A smell. I have spent enough years in archive work with ancient resin samples, in Anglican services, in Catholic churches, in Nigerian Pentecostal vigils. I am not easily stopped by a religious smell. This was different. I could identify myrrh immediately, pure myrrh. The real material, not the diluted version used in commercial incense. Under the myrrh, something bark warm. Cinnamon. Almost certainly cinnamon. Under that, something I could not immediately name but had encountered once before in a research context I could not at that moment recall. Something resinous and slightly medicinal and strange. And under all of it, olive oil carrying everything forward. The compound came through that door and held me in place on the pavement. I walked in. It was an Ethiopian Orthodox church. The service was already in progress. I sat near the back. I had not planned to stay. A deacon was moving through the congregation. He was carrying a vessel and he was anointing foreheads, wrists, the backs of hands, and the smell followed him through the room. I sat for the full 2 hours. I did not understand the Jay's liturgy. I could not follow the prayers, but the smell was doing something I was finding difficult to account for in my usual academic language. It was not producing a sensation I needed to analyze. It was producing a recognition, as if something in the compound itself knew what it was supposed to do and was doing it. After the service, I found the deacon. I told him I was a researcher in ancient Near Eastern religious texts and asked what was in the oil. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "What God gave to Moses, what Athanasius brought to Ezana. We have not changed it." I asked about the third ingredient, the one that sat under the cinnamon, the one I had encountered before and could not yet place. He said, "We call it the reed of fragrance. It comes from the highlands. We have always used it, the reed of fragrance." I thanked him. I went back out onto the pavement. I was 20 minutes late for my meeting at King's College. That evening, I opened Exodus chapter 30 on my laptop, verses 22 through 25. I read the formula. I matched the smell to the text. Myrrh, immediately. Cinnamon, yes. Cassia, the harder edge under the cinnamon, the boundary note. The fourth ingredient, the reed of fragrance from the highlands, cane bosom, which I had smelled in a research context years before. An archive sample, ancient resin analysis. I had not connected it until that night. I read until past midnight. I have a small bottle in my desk drawer. Not Myron from that church. I did not take any. A preparation I made myself afterward, from the formula. When I open it, I am back on that pavement on a Thursday morning in my mid-40s, stopped by something that came through a door. And something I cannot fully account for, but no longer try to explain away, happens in the room when I open it. The formula knows what to do. I am still not sure exactly what the mechanism is, but I have stopped needing to be certain before I use it. Now let me give you the recipe. Not as a historical curiosity, not as an academic exercise, as a practice. You are going to need 5 things. First, myrrh essential oil, Commiphora myra, the same species as the Exodus formula, available at health food stores, specialty essential oil suppliers, or online. Look for 100% pure essential oil, not a blend, not a diluted product. Second, cinnamon bark essential oil, Cinnamomum verum. This distinction matters, not cinnamon leaf. The bark is the inner bark, the same structure as what the formula specifies. Cinnamon leaf contains a different primary compound and is not the correct part of the plant for this preparation. Third, calamus essential oil, Acorus calamus, also called sweet flag. Available from herbal suppliers and online essential oil companies. Some countries restrict it. Check your local regulations. If calamus is unavailable where you are, sweet flag root in tincture form is an alternative that some researchers of this formula have used with comparable results. Fourth, cassia essential oil. Cinnamomum cassia. A different species from cinnamon bark, same genus. Available from the same suppliers. Harder character than cinnamon, spicier at the edge, the boundary note in the formula. Fifth, pure olive oil is the carrier, cold pressed if you can find it. The same olive oil you would use in your kitchen, from a quality source. This is the base, the medium through which everything else moves. Now the ratios. Exodus chapter 30 gives us 4 parts myrrh, to 2 parts cinnamon, to 2 parts calamus, to 4 parts cassia, all in an olive oil carrier. For a 30 milliliter bottle, approximately 1 ounce of olive oil, 12 drops of myrrh essential oil, 6 drops of cinnamon bark essential oil, 6 drops of calamus essential oil, 12 drops of cassia essential oil. Add the essential oils to the olive oil in a dark glass bottle. Swirl gently to combine. Do not shake vigorously. Store away from direct light. Essential oils degrade under light exposure. Dark glass preserves the compound. One practical note that I want you to take seriously. Cinnamon bark and cassia are dermally sensitizing at high concentrations, always diluted in the olive oil carrier before any skin contact. Never apply essential oils neat, undiluted, key to the skin. The olive oil in this formula is not decorative. Moses received this formula for practical use. Practical use means skin-safe application. The carrier is part of the formula. Respect it. How do you use it? Solomon did not make this oil as a theoretical exercise. He anointed with it. He anointed the spaces he wanted consecrated. He anointed the people within his household. He anointed himself. Here is how the practice translates. The doorpost of every room you want sealed. Anoint the right side, upper third of the frame. 1 drop on your fingertip, applied to the wood. The same placement as the Shaddai inscription that has been written above doorposts in the Jewish mezuzah tradition for 3,000 years. Right side, upper third, so the anointed point is the first thing encountered by whatever approaches the threshold. Your own forehead, in the morning. 1 small drop, fingertip applied at the center of the forehead. Solomon's priests anointed the heads of those entering covenant relationship. The same logic holds. The forehead anointing is not ceremonial. It is a declaration. You are marking what belongs to the covenant. James chapter 5 verse 14. Is anyone among you sick? Let them call the elders of the church to pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. The New Testament did not retire this practice. It relocated the authority. The temple hierarchy is gone. The covenant community, the household of faith, inherited the practice. Anoint your children's foreheads. The Sabbath is a natural occasion for this, as Solomon's priests anointed those within the covenant at the weekly gathering. Anoint the palms of your hands before prayer, not as a ritual that earns the prayer a hearing, as a declaration that the hands being raised carry something into the intercession. This is not superstition. This is the mechanism Solomon understood, the covenant substance on the covenant body in the covenant act. 3 things aligned, and when all 3 are aligned, something happens that does not happen when only 1 or 2 are present. I want to return to the prohibition before I close, because some of you have been thinking about it the whole time we have been here, and that concern is right. You should not dismiss Exodus 30 verse 33. You should understand it. The prohibition exists because the oil carries a claim. Anyone who makes it casually, without understanding what they are handling, without covenant relationship, as a curiosity or an experiment or a performance, is doing something legally incoherent in the framework of the covenant. The ban protected the formula from that. But you are not doing that. You understand what this oil is. You know the covenant it represents. You are not applying it to outsiders or making a false claim of authority you do not hold. You are anointing your own household in the name of the God who gave the formula. In the tradition, James chapter 5 established for exactly this purpose. Solomon's authority was real and specific to his position. Your authority is real and specific to yours. the covenant member, the believer, the one who stands under the name the oil represents. The prohibition protected the formula from misuse. You are not misusing it, you are inheriting it. There is a difference between those two things. Solomon understood the difference. He made the oil knowing the ban existed. He made it because his authority was greater than the restriction, not in defiance of the covenant structure, but as the person most fully within it. Your authority is different in kind, not in the direction it points. James chapter 5 placed the practice of anointing within the covenant community. That is your authorization. Use it. The formula has survived 3,000 years, not in a museum, in a church in Battersea, in every Ethiopian Orthodox church where the Myron is consecrated annually by the Patriarch, distributed to the faithful, carried home in small vessels, in the hands of deacons who recite from memory what Athanasius gave to Ezana, in rooms where the smell of ancient Israel arrives every year on a specific Sunday, in a small brown glass bottle in my desk drawer. When I open it, I am on that pavement on a Thursday morning, stopped mid-stride, unable to walk past. I stayed for 2 hours without intending to. I asked the deacon what was in the oil. He said, what God gave to Moses. I went home and opened Exodus chapter 30, and something I had been studying for decades, the formula, the weights, the 4 substances, became something else, not a text, a smell, and then a preparation, and then a practice. I keep the bottle in my desk because I work in a room that should be sealed. I open it the way you light a lamp in a dark room, not dramatically, not with ceremony, simply, because it is what the room requires. The formula knows what to do. I'm still not entirely certain how it works. Theologically, I have accounts. The convergent testimony of the Jewish mezuzah tradition, the Ethiopian Myron, the clavicular Salomonis, the New Testament practice in James 5, all pointing at the same substance for the same purpose. Physiologically, I have accounts. What aromatic compounds do in a space, how smell operates below the threshold of conscious decision. What I have beyond the accounts is the bottle, and what happens in the room when I open it. 4 substances. The ratio from Exodus 30, the carrier that Moses received with the formula, 3,000 years old, still available, still working, the same formula Solomon used when he anointed every room in the temple he built, when he sealed what he needed sealed, when he applied to stone and cedar and doorpost and skin, the covenant substance that the most powerful prohibition in the Torah could not contain, because he was the man with the authority to deploy it. And you are the one with the inheritance to continue it. Make the oil anoint your home, seal what needs sealing. The formula has not required an update in 3,000 years. I do not think it will require one now.